You can either continue sitting or with your eyes open or closed, but I would like to say a few words, not to you specifically alone, something close to that, but also there are people, quite a few people who are watching who've been in my life for many decades worldwide and who follow me on a very intimate level. So I want to say some things to those people. And if you do have things that are somehow super, uber relevant to you, I mean really relevant, I don't mind having some personal exchange with you. One, I don't see that my life is either meditating or non-meditating anymore. And I say that not as something easily achieved. And I know it's a cliche to say, live your life like a prayer. That's one thing to say that, and it's another thing to live in the relativity of that truth if it means something to you. I've joked somewhat over the last couple of months that I'm more monastic today than even at the best of my times as a monk in a monastery. And I really genuinely see that. I've had intimate discussions about what that means to live in relative context that's orthodox, like a traditional nun in a monastery, versus what does it mean to be a lay woman in a community and live in fidelity to the meaning of monasticism and renunciation and intimacy with the sacred. Those are very complex concepts, right? And if one doesn't really carefully, to state the obvious, look intimately, carefully, deeply, with all the various qualities of independent, intelligent thinking, discernment, critical analysis, it's hard to know what they really mean to you. You could easily live in the flotation of acceptable dogma and never really, connect those two worlds with your changing heart. Many nuns and monks leave the monastery and leave their monasticism behind. And I know that's somewhat of a clever statement, but it's tragic on some level, but true for many of us, and it's been something true for me. People have called this bypassing. I don't really agree with that term at all. I think one of the reasons why I've gotten involved in the spiritual life is that you can truly bypass most of the bullshit. I'm not here to integrate all being in all ways with everything. I'm here to find what freedom means from suffering, primarily my own body. Now, I'd like to say a few words a little bit about the context that I find myself in today, which is not too unfamiliar with all of us here and all of us around the world. We're almost forced, if not compelled, at a very deep level of conscience, to really consider deeply the context of our lives today. It's not normal. However, that not normal is the tragic normal for many civilizations, as we know, both throughout history and in present time phenomena on the planet. Who could ever put themselves in the mind and body of a sex worker in Somalia and call what we have here abnormal? Who could ever put ourselves in the mind and body of a political prisoner being raped right now in Burma and call what we have right now normal? Abnormal. So it's so relative what we're dealing with, but on a global level, to state the obvious, communities, countries, families, marriages are being radically severed based upon ideology, information. Misinformation is now standard curriculum in Waldorf kindergarten. disinformation. What is propaganda? What is a propagandist? How do we know the meaning of indoctrination, mind control? We've heard the word mass hypnosis. History has a very brilliant way of repeating itself. We got involved in spiritual life based upon a perception that we don't want to participate in historical references that have denigrated human life. I don't want to go through a Holocaust. I don't want to go through a war, a genocide. And so I retreated from the world to find out what could I do that wasn't constantly rearranging the living room furniture, so to speak. How could I take care of my own interior? Now here with this diagnosis, which all of us have upon birth, upon medical evaluation, we're all in degrees of terminal. Oh, that has a very negative term. If we don't examine our emotional, cultural conditioning to the word terminal, we might think of immediately I need to start fearing. I need to really rise up and learn how to grieve properly. No offense to the grievers. But to play high stakes with yourself is my point. And I've been a very high stake kind of guy. I don't do well with, no offense to anyone in the ordinary. I don't do well. I kind of collapse. I get addicted to various things. I get distracted. I try to divert my attention. But when it's pressure is under the pressure, I rise up to something. And right now we're under pressure. I don't know how aware people are, but has there ever been a vocabulary, a narrative, a conversation of such radical distrust of information in known human history? We have lost an awareness of trust. The New York Times, can it be trusted? Can the Washington Post be trusted? Can CNN be trusted? Can BBC be trusted? Could Joe Rogan be trusted? Could Dr. Robert Malone be trusted? Could Dr. McCullough be trusted? Could Ryan Coleman be trusted? Who to trust? Why to trust? How I trust them? And how well do we really value the process of learning to know what's true, is my point. That seems to be the issue today, not the analysis on what's not right or wrong, but how well do we want to know not just one's own truth, but an evolving one's own truth, right? Now, those of us who are in stages of, I would call it more overt collapse, biological collapse. And I don't mean this in any joking way. I've never felt better in my life now that I'm dying. Oh, really? You really can say that? Yeah, yeah. It's because of the mushrooms you're doing? Is it because of the acid you're doing? Because of the ketamine spray that you use? What the fuck is your recipe to feel so good with knowing that you could die any second? And that's a really, really interesting question. And I'm not suggesting that we have it, but we might want to have, what does it mean to really, really rise up? And I'll kind of come to the last quarter of this. A rise up in a consideration for things larger than our own self-interest. One, I am so self-obsessed. I trained myself in self-obsession. I was a meditator. I OCD'd on meditation. That's not a pejorative term. I mean, you go to a monastery, you go to a meditation center, there's no clock, there's no calendar, there's no time that you're going to end the retreat. There's not 2 days. You're not going back to normal. You pull off from shore purposely not to return to dock. You're losing, consciously wanting to lose an identity that was okay, but you don't mind leaving it behind. With terminal diagnoses or aging, you look in the mirror and you go, I'm 27 years old, I'm beautiful, I don't do Botox, but I'm fucking dying. And then you go, well, on the other hand, I've got at least 50 to 60 more years ahead of me. I did that every year. But now it's like, it's really real. That's a very relative term. What's really real? So I'm saying, what's really real? What is truth? And am I really playing high stakes with what's true here? Or am I playing cultural, acceptable spiritual norms? And I have not seen so much spiritually acceptable cultural expectation norms put onto me now that I've been in hospice. Shocking to me how many friends you can lose when you're dying by not saying anything or agreeing or disagreeing. It's shocking how much comes out in the unexpected psychotherapeutic event of you should be feeling this and I'm telling you, how are you? And it's like, what? What is going on? I don't feel that. Well, you know, the unspoken truth is, really? What is the magic potion to deal and transform this circumstance that we're in without being a pawn in the pornography of fear and control? Political, spiritual, cultural, personal, sexual, erotic, existential. Call the dimension you want to play in, all of them at once. We are victims and saints in a conditioning matrix. And spiritual people, I think, those ones that I really connect to, want to like fucking disengage from the slavery of the context. I did not take birth to be a prisoner of God. Okay? Yes, I'm dying. Fuck you, God. Oh, you should be feeling fear. What's really hard is the ones you love, they're paying for you. What's really hard for me are the unborn, the children. I've got a daughter. You've got children. We've got grandchildren. Man, I've made it. I'm not suffering. And if I am, so be it. But it's the children and the unborn. My point, we're in a very complex moment where on one hand, a very large part of me wants to participate in the transformation of society, civilization, country, politics. Like I want to be an activist now more than ever. There's value in speaking out. But what do you speak out about? I know so many really cool, interesting, sort of interesting people who are falling off my radar who are thought leaders, spiritual icons, who have gone down the rabbit hole. They didn't have discernment when it came time to have discernment. Where was that lacking? There wasn't critical analysis. There wasn't independent inquiry. There wasn't self-questioning. Intimate self-questioning. This is why I've gone into retreat. Like, what's true for me at the level of my most intimate self-questioning? So I'll close here. On one hand, it's never been more important in the world to know what the truth is rather than our truth. Self-doubt is a very high virtue. And there's so much compliance right now with misinformation. In my humble opinion, I'm not going to get into what it is, unless you really want to go down that road at some point. There's so much compliance with misinformation that one feels empowered by their own stupidity, without even knowing it, by a euphemism of my wisdom. And they even conflate it with compassion for you, asshole. And they put labels all over you. You're a Nazi anti-vaxxer. And you go, well, where did that come from? Why aren't you wearing masks? Why aren't you getting tests? Why aren't you? Why aren't you? Why aren't you? You really listened to Steve Bannon? Well, he had Robert Kennedy on and talked about his book, The Real Anthony Fauci. That doesn't fit with me. He was a Trump supporter. And you go, I don't think we should have had this conversation. So eventually you end up having almost no conversations today. How many times I hear this from people writing me, how do you talk to your wife or your husband? You know, and I wanted to simply say, I don't know. I don't know. And so I've called off the conversation and have turned towards the arts as a way of speaking my activism. It's not human. And so the other part of this is, I would like to encourage a self-doubt, a self-inquiry about what the truth is right now, because the stakes are really high. It's not just a pandemic, it's not just about Omicron and Delta. And I don't mean to go conspiratorial on it, but there are a lot of really smart political, intellectual activists, doctors, nurses, frontline workers, almost no spiritual people, who are really looking carefully at how the erosion of civil liberties, the tyranny in democracy, really the possibility of social credit, and next thing you know, a Q code that determines your worth and your payments and your credit card. Is it really going to go down that? Are these people in the White House and the oligarchs in Silicon Valley, are they really organized in this conspiratorial so-called takeover? Is it really happening at that level of orchestration? Was it planned? Or is this just kind of idiocy just manifesting? Okay. Now I know you know what I mean. I'm going to get into too much more detail with that, but it's like the other side of it is taking care of yourself. You know, really coming home to that sacredness of innateness. I cannot emphasize enough in my own personal process. I'm not saying anything to encourage you or discourage you, but the innateness of your own worth. I've been so self-judgmental. People criticize me for being this way or that way. I've often joked, if you only knew how I criticize myself, what you're saying to me is almost a compliment. But to really come home when you're kind of like in a moment-to-moment oddity, if you will, with life and death. I mean, the word hospice and terminal, and knowing that you're an embodied biological, psychological creature, that you have nothing over me, Alan, I have nothing over you. Any second, discontinuity could happen. 250,000 people today, to state the obvious, will die mid-sentence or mid-silence every day. And then you multiply that with a world in collapse. People talk today, even my daughter talks today, about planetary extinction. I'm not bothered by this, by the way. It's what you do on Maui, right? And then you read things like Michio Kaku's book on the simultaneity of extinctions in solar systems and galaxies going on right now. And you go, oh my God. And the film that's out with Leonardo DiCaprio, which, don't look up, it's a, you know, a satirical, irreverent, you know, astrophysical human dilemma of an asteroid taking the planet out, 100% of all life will die. And you go like, okay, the whole planet's in hospice. And then you go back to, now what? I'm in that now what phase, but a little bit higher up the mountain than now what. And I want to end like this. This is why this weekend was so important in this retreat, is how to eliminate ordinary as much as humanly possible from your life. How to relax slightly negative dialogues and narratives and no longer think you need to correct someone's inability to understand the truth. To cease needing to explain yourself. And to find that more sacred, beautiful place in your own being that I know you know, it's not neglected, but wow, okay. I want to know the fearlessness of my spirit. There's nothing. I don't want to need morphine when I'm suffering. I really want to call off the pharmaceutical industry in my body. I'm done. I don't want to fear anything. And you know why? Because I want to fear nothing. Not that thing, nothing. And so I'm systematically removing fear from my life. And with it is like, what is beautiful about your own process? And to be in an intimate dialogue with your own process. And for me, that's required tuning out, shutting out others in the world for a while. It's called sacred retreat. I've not known this level of quietude and self-reflection as a response to the world and as a response to my own conditioning to interrupt the ordinary and give yourself every possible gift that you could imagine to elevate the status of your own consciousness. Meditate more. Walk a little bit slower. Stay home a little bit more. Stop the habit of serving so elegantly. Serve oneself, that kind of thing. So I hope I'm making some sense and some connection. And I know it's not an easy thing to know who we are and what to do at this point. And don't know how much you're paying really intimate attention to the politics and the narratives of various camps in America and the world. But I've not seen anything more precious in my years of life than freedom. And I was saying to a friend the other day that there are 5 key words to the so-called coding of my own soul. And one is the word nibbana. In Buddhism, it means unconditional freedom in the moment and permanently, if one develops the qualities, permanently free of affliction. Wow, one goes, wow, there's a concept and a practice on the planet for nibbana, freedom from affliction. And that's actually a pleasant sound compared to the lawnmower. The other word is panya, which means wisdom in Buddhist Pali. The wisdom to know what to release and the wisdom to know what to elevate. And then the other 3 words are the characteristics of existence: anicca, anatta, and dukkha. They're often talked about as the ultimate characteristics of everything. Every thought, every emotion, every birth, every whisper of a hummingbird, every death, every heartbeat, every photon in this vast mystery of the earth and the sky. The rainbow, the water, the sand, the beating of our own body and heart rate now is anicca, a set of immeasurable conditions that are impermanent. Why would one ever think that you could hold on to that which by nature is always changing? It makes logical sense, but the Dharma journey is to actualize an experiential wisdom that can more immediately engage the reality of impermanence and still live a life. Imagine right now that we really felt at the finest levels of being, the most psychedelicized level of being, that every molecule in this room, every perception, every molecule of our body, every history, everything was in absolute, minute, impermanent flux. What would we fear? Why would we fear death when there's nothing there that could be held anyway? The loss of perception, the loss of familiarity, yes. There's something beautifully neurotically bonding about how the eye bonds with perception. And you go, wow, isn't that the spiritual challenge, to realize these ultimate characteristics? Like, there's not a day that goes by now where I'm graded by, at this moment, can you occupy anicca, Alan? You have no time to project learning about it. Okay, so the other word is anatta. Very, very challenging concept in Buddhist psychology. That there is no centrality to the circumstance. And that's a very powerful, wow, is there really no one behind the veil that's permanent, that's observing changing phenomena? You mean there's no essence to the phenomenology of being? There's no soul? You can't find an unchanging subject to changing objects? Well, I've tried to pierce the mystery of those ideologies meditatively, and I've not found anything inside or outside that can be relied upon as me. Even my idea of me gets evaporated just like that through the perception of how we project death. I've practiced dying the last few months. I've practiced well living, but I've not practiced dying. That's a very challenging practice, to wake up and start breathing without the hope of the next breath. Really? And you go into, okay, wow, why not? Do everything you can to make good on the promise of a fearless life. You could easily say, come what may, when it comes, fine. But you really want to greet it as a lover. That's been my experience in this process. And so this anatta concept is very, very fascinating to me. I walk the beach every day when I could walk. Now I sit in the forest there a lot. And there's no place in the movement of the clouds, the rainbows, the rain, the breeze, the sand, the ocean, the people, the movements, my heart. I can't find centrality. It's an environment of conditions with the appearance of a me in it. When I look to find me, even when I've been psychedelicizing myself for the last 5 months, looking into the mirror, narcissistic me, looking into the mirror and asking, who am I? And talk to this person. And then watching the video of me talking to myself about who I am. And it's really amazing to see that, wow, it's just changing phenomena moving in this endless stream of anicca without centrality. And you go, wow, what an incredible hoax it is to think of someone who's dying. This existential trickery And you really go, okay, wow, signed up for that, did you? Too much acid before 18, whatever. But it's not. You look at these great saints out of India and Asia, and their central message is anatta. Nibbana, enlightenment, is the absence, as the Buddha said, of someone who dies. He called enlightenment the deathless. It wasn't immortality. There's no one who dies. There's no one who suffers. There is suffering, but no one who suffers. There is just the perception of that. And if you really intimately bring a mindful intelligence to perception, you'll see that it's just perception and not a you. And that's a very interesting area to go. And the last one is dukkha. In the absence of seeing, wisdom, nibbana, anicca and anatta, if there is I, there will be suffering. The absence of I is the absence of suffering. Isn't that the absence of what? It's a more intimate ease of being, freely associated with the phenomena of I and other. It's not a duality, it's that you free up the egoic configuration. And it turns out, it seems like, from my humble opinion, that this dukkha element of dissatisfaction is born from separation from life. And it's the absence of oneness. It's something more holy than oneness, from my humble opinion. It's everythingness, not oneness, and the absence of allness. Paradoxical and wise at the same point on a felt level. And where is the center of a universe if there's no north, south, east, or west? Where is the center of my being if there's no north, south, east, or west, or birth, or aging, or death? The Buddha was said to have said these are just ideas. Intimately associate with the intimacy of your own mind and body at a very subtle level, and you'll see that there is suffering, but no one who dies. The more one has a punya relationship to that, there'll be the relaxation of fear and greed and attachment. And it's never been more important to me as I close here. You know, I feel blessed. I don't know about you. I feel blessed. Doesn't work a lot of the time in the way that it used to work. But there's still the cognitive clarity that is even more refined today than ever to intimately inhabit the wisdom of being, not what I've assumed to be the truth of being. That innocence. Are you activating your dharma really as much as you take care of your body and your health and your finances? And that's the biggest question right now that's come to me is like, now that I'm in hospice and now that I'm in retreat, I have gifted myself circumstantially with the friends. I'm a process like you are of the gifts of others. I cannot be who I am without others, but I'm not going to let that be who I am. Am I gifting myself with my highest dharma? And I'm going to close here. That dharma to me is called rebirthing now. It's a very intimate concept. Oh, really? What does rebirthing mean to you? And it's been something over the last couple of years, the last 10 months since this diagnosis, the last 3 months, where I spent a lot of intimate time in what does it mean to navigate your life rather than die? Truly navigate out of this time dimension body and rebirth both in this life and rebirth throughout this life and rebirth throughout life. And this concept isn't mine. My teacher before he died, Seda U Pandita, in our last set of conversations, talked to me about the role of transforming your spiritual dharma life, your meditation language, into rebirthing. proactive engagement of the phenomena of mind and body that is leaving and shedding the artifice of the diagnoses and the historical relationships to memory and pain and leaving it all behind. Thank you very much. I'm shedding the diagnoses. Thank you, medical industrial complex. Thank you, doctors. Thank you, earthlings. I love you. But it's a rebirthing process now. And I don't know if that touches any place in you, but, you know, all of us have relative relationships to how much time is left and why die well when you can rebirth with greatness. Take the death out of the process. Take the harm out of the process. Take the familiarity out of the process. Take the misinformation out of it. Take former truths out of the process. What is a new dimension of spiritual practice today that speaks to the edge of my heart and being? And I'm just sharing with you what I'm doing. I'm not suggesting you do anything. And as you know, I had a conversation recently with the Reverend Bodhi B. It's up online on YouTube, you can see. He's a beautiful mind. There are many things I disagree with about how I hear him speak about the process. I know they're true for him and many other people, but they're not really true for me. And I can speak about them now from a very clear and honest place of breaking conventions, even with high-level wisdom for myself. And that's the rebirthing process. How high a stakes are you willing to go right now? You're not aging, you're not dying, you're rebirthing with radical stamina, resilience, patience, power. You're not becoming more frail. Your body may be, but your cognitive processes may dim a little bit. I've been looking at Rinpoches and people who know Rinpoches about their transition process. They've been sending me things of how the mind seems to diminish in some cases, but there are others where the mind becomes even more heightened because their physicality is intimately connected, but they go, okay, I'm going to disconnect from the biological collapse. That's a very subtle form of letting go. But letting go here isn't just go with the flow. It's like taking hold without the parachute, and you're going to be safe. And you go, wow, I'm borning again. I'm coming into my power again. I am coming into a higher radiant power. And I think that's a mental shift that could be happening out of the global circumstances. If enough of us unite in solidarity and take the fear and the cultural misinformation, a lot of spiritual information, a lot of Buddhist misinformation. It's all relative. It's been good. We're in a new paradigm now. And I feel like I'm a kind of an early virginal front runner in this process in my relative understanding. And I'm just, again, sharing exactly where I'm hanging out. And it takes a lot of chutzpah, a lot of courage. But it's far easier and a better form of courage than conventional courage to face your collapse. It's an easier courage for me to face dying. And it's a much more joyful process, a much more invigorating process to get out of bed, to birth and rebirth and know that Dharma. I've got another day in the human incarnation to start navigating, just as I would driving to Whole Foods. I don't go to Kihei instead. I'm navigating my life. And that's my point. Are you willing to navigate your future? Take it out of a crystal ball, take it out of astrology, take it out of the psychic intuitive. Lamas, Rinpoches, Sayadaws, lots of savants and saints navigate. This is not, I'm not hoping for some miracle healing, personally. Healing is not in my vocabulary. So I hope that has something in there that might touch you. And if you want to talk about these kind of things, I'm all in. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes to leave it with you and those who may be tuning in to just feel what's relevant. And at any time, if you wish to be on your own, be in the yard here. It's so gorgeous. And we'll take a few minutes. If there's something you want to talk about, I'm happy to engage that conversation. Because this is all very new territory for me to share. And only my closest, dearest allies know a little bit of this. And I would venture to say almost no one knows much about it more than myself, because I don't share it. But if it's important to you, I'm happy to take time to share it with you. And for posterity's sake, let me just see if this is working properly. Oh, yeah. Okay, your turn. Anything at all that's important for you that you might want to ask or talk? Yes, Lily.
I'm wondering how you see the rebirthing process.
How I see the what?
How do you see the rebirthing? I've had an experience.
How do you feel it?
On a light dusting of Lucy. I felt myself giving birth to something, but I couldn't see what it was, and in my wry humor I said, I hope it's not Rosemary's baby.
Yeah.
It felt like this unknown something that's coming out, and that's all I can say about it. Was I have
okay, hear you. How do you feel the rebirthing? How do you feel it? You know, just in an extemporaneous kind of unscripted, intimacy with you. I've had many identities throughout my life, and I've had the good fortune to see them sometimes a little bit after the fact, and after I've heard a number of people and I've gotten enough blowback to realize that doesn't work. Other times I've been more mindful to shed things before I harm people. But these identities shed. Shedding identity is a rebirthing. Here at this stage is so much spiritual, cultural, sanctified the way it works. Dharma. That the next thing you know, you're wearing other suits of psychological, existential armor to get you through. I'm saying, like, what's really true for you at the most virginal, intuitive sense of your sensibilities. What's your holiness? What's your cathedral of truth? Not Jesus or Buddha, Kuan Yin or the Dalai Lama. Not your Buddhist theology, not your Sufi theology. Yes, they all work, but what is your Sufi? What is your Rumi? What is your goddess? And for me, because I'm very into intimate, psychedelicized, supported, meditative, thought, heart, existential experiments, where I play with process, I can shape-shift in these processes to not be who I thought I was 2 hours before. And I begin to see these ethereal forms that I really prefer to be than encased in an epidermis with organs. And guess what? It's going to come a point, just like your mom and dad and your teacher and your 3 best friends and everyone that you know on the planet, 800 billion were said to die before us here. They all stop moving. Then what? So the last part of my question is, how do you feel that? Sensitize. That takes deep practice. I'm right now transcribing notes that I found from my meditation retreat with my teacher in 1985. 11 weeks of intensive practice. And I took notes throughout it. In the last 2 days before I left the monastery, I wrote about 50 pages by hand of my experience. And I'm now typing these. I found the transcript. I found the handwritten in Vancouver when I was recently there. And I can see, wow, what a refined place. But guess what? I'm more refined today. That was 11 weeks of intensive practice, 20 hours a day. Very unusually heightened states of mind. With a teacher there every day, seeing him with 1,000 people in silence. My point is, are you willing to do what's required, Alan, to anoint yourself with the conditions and the environment to really go now intimately close to your soul and create the body that's innately there, but inhabit that birthing, new, ethereal, tangible, deva-like, angelic form? Where do you want to go? Do you want to be an angel on earth? Do you want to be another human? Do you want to be a silver sword in the crater? Or what do you want to be? Or do you want to be? And I've asked myself, what do I want to be? I want to be fucking free of suffering, even that too. Where? I want to be with the next Buddha. I really like people who are radically wise and who can communicate that. I'm a kindergarten student. I've had great teachers. I want to be with a great teacher, not a teacher. I want to be with a Buddha. And they say that, Dalai Lama aspires to be a Buddha. He carries a lot of cachet. There are a lot of people who follow teachings of the Buddha around the world, maybe close to 700 million. And it said that the last Buddha was the 23rd in a sequence of 24 Buddhas. And the next Buddha, they say, might have a tanka here of the Buddha, Maitreya. Maitreya, the next Buddha, which means, kindness. And for me personally, I have a deep aspiration to truly be reborn in the company of Maitreya, to be reunited with what I call my samsaric sangha, brothers and sisters, devas, angels, beings. I look at you, Lili, and how, imagine you and I had the psychic capacity, and there are those who have it, where we look at each other, and we've known each other, say, even relatively 100 lifetimes. And we look at the various formations of what we did and didn't do, that we loved and didn't like, throughout 100 lifetimes. The Buddha was said to have been able to see 100,000. I want to be with someone who has that kind of wisdom, where you look at these Buddhist texts. I've got 33 volumes, 11,000 pages, where the Buddha is said to be talking to individuals. And in a conversation, they become fully enlightened in a conversation. Why do we need to low dose in order to feel something more holy? Why not become enlightened? Why not play really high stakes? Since I'm playing really high stakes, I want to be in the company of a Buddha and hear a Buddha teach, talk, take rebirth with him as a human. I want to become fully enlightened and want to achieve the highest state in my relative terms of Nibbana. They call it arhantship. And exit this paradigm. This is a bad design for me. I don't like that we have to contend with genocide. I don't like that one girl is raped in this universe. I don't want to make good on that promise. And I don't want to call it oneness. I don't want to call it non-duality. A girl's rape is dual. There was a very evil individual conditioned by some kind of venom that raped her, but it's not an illusion. So I don't like this time. It's not a very interesting design for me. And so I want to be in my exit to be reborn there. So that's a relatively in this life. But as my teacher said, navigate, learn the art of navigation. This is a micro blip in time. If you've got a year, a minute, or 20 years in front of you, or 30, it is a micro blip in cosmological time. And imagine if we knew that at noon today, that all of us on this planet would perish. How would we live that time? Make haste in the rebirthing. How well can we feel context? And so I feel context very intimately. That's why I became a monk. I did not like urbanization. I did not like capital competition. I did not like the culture of sanctified greed. I did not like, I got very, very connected to the intimacy of yoga and meditation and psychedelics. And meditation was the organic process of that. And then I began to see in meditation you can actually reignite new forms of identity. After 1 month in a monastery, I was no longer the Alan who entered it, rebirthed. I never knew the word exactly, except when my teacher brought it to me. Now it's about rebirthing. He could probably see something in me or in himself. So that's like an entry into that. How do you feel it? Sensitize. Look at the temple that Joanna has created and co-created. Look at your own temple. Look at Summer's temple. Does your environment reflect the highest order possibility relative to your commercial, financial capabilities? I'm gifted with a very sacred place, and I have made the interior of that so personally sacred. There is nothing in that place at the moment, even a speck of dust that I can see, that isn't been sanctified. And I'm doing sacred things in my day that really support my rebirthing, my value, my highest value. Because like you or me or Joanna or Summer, there's no certainty that you have tonight. I mean, I am kind of a little bit of a gifted moment where there isn't abject suffering in the diagnoses, but the existential anxiety is over the roof. And I've had to really, okay, whoa, you can't sleep and you don't want sleeping pills. Take the anxiety out of the story. And I've done it. Take the stress out. Rebirthing. I am not the body. Sorry. And it ain't going to go there. And I've made peace with the few people in my life that I really cherish as sacred. We've talked it through, felt it through, rebirthed with them, not just you alone. Leave nothing undone. I mean, make haste while the day still walks and talks and eats. Rebirth as if it's tonight. So increase urgency is my point, Lily. Increase fidelity of environment. Don't take anything for ordinary. And don't give life to the ongoing narrative of what you've thought to be true. This is where I hope I'm not going on too much, but this is where, the whole word of plant medicine, it's not medicine. Igniting elevated states of consciousness. Like I walk on the beach and meditate down there behind Baby Beach a lot of the time now. I call it my deer park where the Buddha gave the first discourse. And I do low doses, medium doses, high doses of acid and mushrooms. And I just sit there and feel. And I bring this up as like, whoa, the immediacy of the process. And not just feel it, but how do you want to shape it? We do yoga. I do yoga every day, an asana. What's the asana of rebirth? Don't just, okay, wow, you're in really radical peace, which is cool. But what is a proactive sculpting of sonic, existential, biological, photonic, spiritual molecules? We're bodies of flesh or light or something that's post-ephemerality. What is enlightenment consciousness embodied? And so, by way of sharing with you, there are very few existential psychotherapists who are willing to talk this way. And there are very few so-called spiritual teachers out there who are willing to talk this way or even have the capacity. I'm not anything special, but this is how I talk to myself. Learn how to talk to yourself in a way where you're asking more questions. Really, you've been, I'll close with this. I was down recently. I've riffed like this with my surgeons who, bless their heart, and And I'll pause at a certain point just to kind of check it out, and they'll say, what do you think? And I'll say, you are really, you're the best magical thinker I've ever heard. I mean, I've heard that. And then the doctor here, I went something similar to this, like a 30-second rendition. And I said, what do you think? He says, you're in active denial. And it's all about the medical industrial complex. Save your life. Run the risk of brain fog permanently. Run the risk of coma. Run the risk of heart attack. Run the risk of dying on the fucking table. But give yourself the gift of longer time in this samsara. No matter how fucking mentally, emotionally, or risky it is. And I'm giving myself urgent, my point here, Lily, urgent environmental elevation. Are you willing to meditate more? What does that mean to you? Are you willing to take risks to heighten your mental clarity? Is this true? So many things that I thought to be true aren't true. I've really looked carefully into the politics right now of who's saying what and what's being said, rightly and wrongly. Who are the propagandists and who are the freedom fighters? What is the truth of each of the vaccinations? What is the serum? What's in the substance? What are the adverse effects? And how do we know the data? Who's telling the truth? Who's interpreting it? You know, I've done my research there. Do that research on your own being, Alan. And that's rebirthing. The feeling question that you had, you know, that's one of the beauties of meditation. And if you're gifted to be, you know, also in an intimate relationship, or, you know, a gifted massage therapist, a gifted alliance with a friend, a gifted relationship with a psychiatrist or psychologist, a soul ally, where you can commune and talk and discuss in the dialectic of the ephemeral. That's so rare. The conversations from your soul to a soul that's wise and elevated, rare. And in the absence of that, don't despair. Come home and learn how to talk to yourself. Be your best guy, be your best friend, and talk yourself up. You know, rebirth. You take control. I've got the medicine to take my life any second. But I've got the cognitive skills to keep rebirthing on my terms, and who knows, maybe it's time, but it won't be done out of fear, I can tell you that. Because I'm now willing to face no matter what. So if you're not willing to face no matter what, and then keep rebirthing, where do you want to be reborn? I've asked this question to people when I was talking. What do you imagine? Some people talk about people who've died. Where do you imagine that man or woman to be reborn? And it's amazing to me the answers that come. You know, people say, "Oh, she's a dragonfly," or some say that they're an orchid now. Personally, I find nothing romantic in that. I don't want to be a cut orchid in someone's vase in their Kahului flat, no matter how good I look for about 36 minutes. I don't want to be a dragonfly. I don't want to be eaten by a mouse or a rat. So where's your imagination take you? And so for me, a lot of this so-called terminal process is, what are your belief systems? It's very rare to get to someone who can do an echocardiogram on your belief systems, a CTA scan or an MRI on your belief systems. And believe me, you want to do a psychedelic and simply fuck healing, let me come to the truth of my belief systems. And put 3 video cameras around you for 12 hours and have a psychotherapist around you, a friend, ally, sitter, who simply supports you in coming to the truth of your belief systems. Then you know the anatomy of your existential body. I've done that. Then you know where to go from that, called rebirthing. Because you've found the truth, the integrity of your beliefs. You know, very few people have that level of prayer. So anyway, I hope some of that's helpful. And if it is, it's on It's recorded on Facebook. You can see it. But thank you for the question, Lily. Anyone else have anything they'd like to say or ask or share? Take your time, think. Oh, it's well into that time for lunch. So take your time until, say, 1:30 to have whatever you need to have, drink and food. Thank you for this gifted temple, this land, to be here, Joanna. And thank you for coming, and thank you for tuning in. I hope there's something valuable in all this for you. I trust that there is. And I'll see you at 1:30. From my heart to yours. Thank you.